Hello and welcome to the Cailleach's Cave. I'm going to be doing some storytelling today. One of the main themes of Samhain this year is storytelling, and another one is crafting, so I'm going to tell you a story about crafting. This is a story that I wrote earlier this year when there was a lot of rain and there were floods across the country, and the story is called The Flood Tapestry. And it is about an old shepherdess who lives on a farm in the very north of Scotland, where there are rolling fields on the northeast, and she has a small flock of sheep. She's very, very old and very familiar with her sheep, and she knows them all by name, by a little crinkle in one ear and a fleck of amber in an old eye. And she's not very close with her neighbours. She doesn't often see them. They live very far away. But one day, one of her neighbours comes by as she's weeding her vegetable patch, and he doffs his little tweed cap at her. "All right?" And she kind of nods and says, "Yeah." And he peeks over the wall and says, "Oh, nice vegetables you've got there." She says, "Oh, thank you." And then he says, "I've been hearing some scary news about a flood a-coming." And, she kind of rustles her feathers a little bit and says, "A flood? No! Okay, I need to look after my sheep. I need to look after my house, my vegetable patch. It's all going to ruin." But she's a practical lady, so it's okay. She decides that she will prepare the cottage with some sandbags, and she will cover the vegetable garden in sheeting, and she will possibly bring the sheep indoors, which is something that she does when there's a lot of rain. So the rain comes. Sure enough, it is incredibly heavy, and the drops are kind of the size of your fist, and they, create huge lakes in her fields, and her fields very, very quickly become waterlogged. So she decides, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to have to bring the sheep into the house. And she does in fact have an old sheepdog, and so she sends the old sheepdog, whose name is Nell, out to round up the sheep and bring them in. In they come, trundling into her cottage. She has lovely old flagstone floors. She lays down some hay, and she has this lovely living room covered in, old tapestries that she's woven and moth-eaten furniture. And she settles herself down with a good book and maybe some knitting on the side, and puts her feet up. Oops, she's put them up on a sheep. But the sheep don't mind. They're just kind of disgruntled bar, but it's fine because they're all soft and cosy, and it's a cosy little living room. So there she stays, cosy with her sheep in her living room. And the rain doesn't stop, and it keeps coming. And very soon, when she looks out of her kitchen window out into the fields, it's just, the fields have become just lots of lakes. There's lots of lakes in her fields, and she's a bit worried, obviously. So she just thinks, I'm going to have to hunker down, hopefully it'll be okay, and the rain will eventually go. And what she does is she starts working on a tapestry, which is something that she has been doing for most of her life. It's something that she sells, it's one of her crafts. So she begins weaving this beautiful tapestry, and she decides it's going to depict the landscape outside, so the flood. So she starts using beautiful wool that she's woven herself and dyed herself with dye from vegetables from her garden. And she starts weaving, and there's lots of different colours of green for the fields and little flecks for the rain that's falling, little tiny grey flecks and grey clouds, and little bits of lakes where the water is landing in her fields. And when the tapestry is finished, she's a very quick worker, so it only takes her 2 days. She's very good at weaving. When it's finished, she hangs it up on the wall. By this point, the rain is still falling, and it's actually quite scary. And what makes matters worse is there's water coming through her ceiling, which, it's a ramshackle cottage, and she hasn't fixed it in quite a while. And so rain starts plopping on the sheep's heads, and they look up. They're very disgruntled. They're not very happy, of course. Neither is she, and she doesn't know what to do. She can't get out to fix it. She doesn't really know what she's going to do. She looks around her living room and thinks, well, I know what I can do. I can put the tapestry up there. And you might think that that is quite terrible, you know, what a, you know, a use of this beautiful craftsmanship that she's used. But she's also a practical woman, so she thinks the wool is very hardy, it will probably work to stem the flow of the rain. So she rolls it up, goes outside, gets her ladder up, puts it up against the cottage, and clambers up, throws the tapestry over the roof, and just ties down the corners so the wind doesn't blow it off. And once she's done that, she comes down, thinks, well, you know, that'll probably work, goes back into her living room. Sure enough, no more water leaking through. And it's quite nice, and it's quite like that for, you know, a day or so. And the rain is still falling, and her fields are a big lake now. And then she decides that maybe she'll just go and check on the tapestry. Out she trundles again, goes back up the ladder just to see, you know, if the tapestry's holding up okay. But she starts when she gets up to the top of the ladder and sees the tapestry, and she thinks maybe she's going mad in her old age, but somehow the tapestry seems to have changed. You know, there's like slightly less water in the fields that she wove herself, and slightly less rain falling from the sky, and just a little peak of blue sky in between some lovely woven wool clouds. She thinks, what? How can that be a thing? And she turns and looks at the landscape, and in fact the landscape is looking slightly better. It is looking slightly less bedraggled and covered in rain, and the water is slowly going down in her fields, and there is in fact a little fleck of blue sky behind a cloud. She's very confused, but you know, she just puts it down to her old age, trundles down her ladder and goes back inside. The next day she has a look outside the window, and in fact the rain is starting to slow down, and she thinks, I'm just gonna check on that tapestry again. Up she goes her ladder. Sure enough, the tapestry has changed dramatically since yesterday. There's now a sun appearing behind some clouds, and the rain has stopped, and the water is almost gone down. The sun has dried it all up, and this beautiful tapestry that she'd woven is completely changed. She racks her brain. I must be going mad. But then she thinks, you know, there's something about these sheep of mine. There might be something a little bit magic about them and about their wool. So she just kind of puts it down to the magic of the wool, and off she comes down her ladder. Sure enough, in a few days the sun is out, and the landscape has changed, and the water has dried up, and the fields look like they could be inhabited by sheep again. So she goes up, she takes the tapestry down, which is now beautiful, you know, sunshine, depicting exactly the landscape that is outside of her cottage. And she rolls it up, brings it back into her house and says, right, sheep, time for you to go back to the fields. And so she whistles a sheepdog and he rounds them up, and out they trundle into the fields. And just as the last very, very old sheep is kind of puttering its way out of her door into the garden to go back out to the fields, just kind of turns its head slyly to her and gives her like a knowing wink in one eye, and she thinks maybe she's imagining it, but she's also realised that, you know, she can trust the sheep to be a comfort to her and to protect her livelihood. And so, you know, she just thinks, yeah, I mean, my sheep are magic, of course, that makes the most sense. And there you have it. So that is a story about the magic of crafting. See you again soon.